In today's video we will discuss the top 10 most expensive Hollywood movies ever made. Please make sure you subscribe to the top 10 jaw-dropping facts channel. Number 10. Waterworld, 1995. Cost of production, $175 million. Cost adjusted to inflation, $340 million. Box office, $264.2 million. Kevin Costner lived on a trimaran in the middle of the ocean that was once Earth before all the ice caps melted, and dry land became a distant memory, much like Hollywood blockbusters that cost less than $200 million. At the time, the Costner-starring flick of 1995 would have been at the top of the most expensive movie ever produced list. Costner invested over $20 million of his personal funds into the film, for which shooting took place aboard a gigantic 400-foot diameter atoll that was specifically built for production somewhere off the coast of Hawaii. Unfortunately, the spectacular 1,000-ton floating set also swallowed much of the movie's budget, given that it required aerial filming via seaplanes and helicopters. Not to mention 3 huge hurricanes that sank the entire set. Whoever was on the weather lookout duty at the time failed spectacularly at their job. Number 9. John Carter, 2012. Cost of production, $263.7 million, plus $42.9 million on tax. Cost adjusted to inflation, $339 million. Box office, $284.1 million. The cost of John Carter was, with no better way to say it, ridiculous. It left Disney around $200 million out of pocket, making it the company's biggest flop. Rich Ross, the former chairman of Walt Disney Studios, resigned just a month after the movie was released. At the same time, Disney lost the rights to produce the rest of Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated's back catalog. Furthermore, director Stanton began shooting the movie with Taylor Kitsch as the eponymous lead. But, thanks to various problems in post-production, Stanton was forced to shoot much of the movie twice, which soon made the budget spiral out of control. In fact, John Carter would have had to make around $600 million just to break even. It didn't even come close. Number 8. Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, 2015. Cost of production, $250 million. Cost adjusted to inflation, $345 million. Box office, $934.5 million. It isn't surprising that Warner Brothers was willing to put up as many millions as needed to bring the Harry Potter series to the big screen. What is surprising, however, is that The Half-Blood Prince was the most expensive Harry Potter sequel. First, it was the least favored film by fans and critics alike, yet, money doesn't always make a film better. Rumor has it that director Yates initially tried some pretty experimental stuff before being forced to scale it back post-production. Moreover, by 2009, the franchise's stars had already become huge names in Hollywood, and their salaries reflected just that. Still, $275 million for a Harry Potter film is probably one of the safest investments Warner Brothers could have made. And the results prove it: $302 million domestically and $632 million overseas worldwide, totaled $934 million overall. Number 7. Tangled, 2010. Cost of production, $260 million. Cost adjusted to inflation, $353 million. Box office, $592.4 million. To be honest, I wouldn't have guessed Tangled to appear on this list of the most expensive movies ever made. And here's why: it took about 10 years of multiple aborted attempts at the movie, each of which got pretty far in before they scrapped everything and started again. First, much of the budget included redesigning versions of previously attempted flick Rapunzel, dating back to 2000, that were never produced. Secondly, extensive research was done to develop the animation process that allowed the CGI to evoke some of the qualities of traditional hand-drawn Disney characters. Animating all of that blonde hair must have been quite the ordeal. Entertaining but rather forgettable Disney animation that in no way earned its colossal budget. Despite this, Tangled eventually bagged a profit when it was released. It's still pretty mind-boggling how much cash they spent. Number 6. Justice League, 2017. Cost of production, $300 million. Cost adjusted to inflation, $362 million. Box office, $657.9 million. Justice League was an attempt by Warner Brothers to create their own version of the Avengers. Unfortunately, the production of the superhero genre demands a lot of cash, and for Justice League, production costs didn't outweigh the profits, partially as its production suffered several hiccups during filming. First of all, Zack Snyder, with the primary vision for Justice League, had to step down due to the death of his daughter, August Snyder, which meant several reshoots followed. Taken over by Joss Whedon, the color temperature had to be adjusted, leading to high post-production costs. Moreover, as the studio didn't want to delay the production, everything had to be done at speed. Once released, box office earnings were disappointing and reviews were poor. The question of whether the original version would have been less costly or not remains unanswered, however, as a great deal of people were interested in Snyder's original version, Warner Brothers announced its re-release. So, some more editing and an extra $70 million later, the improved Zack Snyder's Justice League, also referred to as the Snyder Cut, was released on HBO Max in 2021, becoming fourth most watched show on the platform. Number 5. Spider-Man 3, 2007. Cost of production, $258 million. Cost adjusted to inflation, $368 million. Box office, $894.9 million. When the original Spider-Man movie was released in 2002, it cost only $139 million to produce. After which, they just started throwing money at the franchise, with its third sequel Spider-Man 3, costing nearly double that. Unfortunately, making expensive flagship superhero sequels is no small or simple feat. Production for the movie dragged on into late summer, whereas it had been scheduled to conclude in June. On top of that, there were the considerable CGI costs, web-slinging set pieces, illustrator salaries, and, of course, marketing and promotion expenses. Spidey 2 had difficulty convincing fans that an aging superhero was still living in a single bedsit, popping round to his Aunt May's house for some home cooking before climbing into the old red-blue spandex. After which, the studio presumably didn't have much choice on the whopping marketing budget. And unfortunately, despite the allocation of over $250 million at the time, the critical reception just didn't pay off. Number 4. Titanic, 1997. Cost of production, $200 million. Cost adjusted to inflation, $369 million. Box office, $2.2 billion. The cost to construct the Titanic set was somewhere between $120 to $150 million alone in 1997 dollars, adding the $40 million for visual effects. You might feel ripped off for that amount of money with anything less than the Ship of Dreams. First of all, remember that grand staircase scene where the water comes crashing in as Rose and Jack try to escape? It only had one shot. Because the set and furnishings were hugely expensive to produce, there was no room for error. Then, there were the convincing special effects. In one shot, we saw the ship from bow to stern, with flags flying and smoke coiling from its stacks. On the deck were hundreds of passengers strolling, children running, servants serving, and so on. And it paid off. The Titanic movie was monumental. It made its colossal production costs part of its marketing campaign, promoting the rich value of the movie like none other. As a result, Titanic went down swimmingly at the box office, pun intended, and is one of the highest-grossing Hollywood movies to date. Despite its $200 million price tag, film critic Roger Ebert described the movie as value for money. Every cent of that budget was spent on production flickers on the screen. Number 3. Avengers, Age of Ultron, 2015, Avengers, Endgame, 2019, Avengers, Infinity War, 2018. Cost of production, $365 million. Cost adjusted to inflation, $456 million. Box office, $1.4 billion. The American superhero film Avengers, based on the Marvel Comics by Marvel Studios, is the most expensive movie franchise ever made. 3 out of 4 Avengers sequels are in the top 5 most expensive movies. The production budget for the original Avengers, 2012, and its 3 sequels Avengers, Age of Ultron, Avengers, Endgame, 2019, and Avengers, Infinity War, 2018, totaled a whopping $1.2 billion. Age of Ultron, 2015, comes first with a budget spend of $365 million. The costs of Age of Ultron ballooned after the cast threatened to quit if their contractual demands, read money, weren't met. So, if they wanted all the big names back on board for the Avengers sequel, Marvel had some serious work to do. All starring A-listers were reportedly looking for at least $5 million on the table and a cut of the post-release profits. On top, there were the far-flung international locations, drone cameras, and the CGI to make the titular villain with all the nuances that Whedon wanted to capture. Everyone knows that increased CGI is never a substitute for clean writing. But, given that Age of Ultron brought in almost $1.3 billion at the worldwide box office, breaking box office records, that doesn't seem to matter. Where there's a will, there's a way, and as one of the best movie quotes from Avengers goes, the hardest choices require the strongest wills. Number 2. Pirates of the Caribbean, on Stranger Tides, 2011, Pirates of the Caribbean, at World's End, 2007. Cost of production, $379 million. Cost adjusted to inflation, $499 million. Cost of production, $1.046 billion. Pirates of the Caribbean film series tops the list of the most expensive Hollywood movies ever produced. Despite the very agreeable box office returns, its fourth sequel, Pirates of the Caribbean, on Stranger Tides, 2011, was no cheap date. Its second sequel, directed by Gore Verbinski, Dead Man's Chest, 2006, and the third film, At World's End, 2007, cost an estimated $225 million and $300 million, respectively. On Stranger Tides landed a slot as the most expensive long shot and the highest budget movie in Hollywood, with Jack Sparrow and Barbassa's Quest costing nearly $400 million. Regardless of the considerable production costs, and Depp's estimated $55 million payout, the box office-busting franchise has been an extraordinary cash cow, pulling in more than $4.5 billion. And since the first time we saw Johnny Depp parading around with beaded dreads in 2003, the Disney execs have been waiting around in gold up to their armpits. So let's see what happens with its sixth, reportedly Johnny Depp-less sequel, and if the extortionate costs will pay off also without Captain Jack Sparrow. Number 1. Avatar, The Way of Water, 2023. Cost of production, $460 million. Cost adjusted to inflation, $520 million. Box office, $1.9 billion, running. With the long-awaited sequel Avatar 2, The Way of Water, the Hollywood director now has 3 of some of the most expensive movies ever made. And another thing is certain, he definitely knows how to deliver a great product capable of earning back an extraordinary amount of money. Forget breaking even, Cameron's new movie hasn't even been released in China yet, and with a theatrical release set in the first part of 2023, a worldwide gross close to $2 billion is within reach. Topping the list as the highest budget movie and one of the highest grossing movies of all time doesn't come with its fair share of subjective criticisms. With a storyline created as a continuation of the first movie and with the idea in mind for a third and fourth sequel, and its XXL duration, Avatar 2, The Way of Water is being labeled as without a beginning nor an end. However, the movie is a joy to behold, thanks to visual effects that have never been so special and technically advanced. I hope you enjoyed our top 10 most expensive Hollywood movies ever made. Please make sure you subscribe to the Top 10 Jaw-Dropping Facts channel. With so many expensive movies made by Hollywood, which one of these movies was your favorite? Leave your favorite movies in the comments below. Do not forget to subscribe to the Top 10 Jaw-Dropping Facts channel. And new episodes release every Monday through Friday.